Good morning, and welcome to NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. I'm Laura Bleacher, and you are watching the post-launch news conference for NASA's SpaceX Crew-6 mission. The Falcon 9 and Dragon, named Endeavour, lifted off of Launch Pad 39A at 12:34 Eastern Time. Now a crew of 4 is headed to the International Space Station. NASA astronauts Stephen Bowen and Woody Herberg, United Arab Emirates astronaut Sultan Al-Niyadi, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fadayev. They will spend about 6 months there to perform science experiments, technology demonstrations, and maintenance activities for the orbiting lab. To tell us more about this mission, we have a great panel of folks for you. To my left, Kathy Leaders, Associate Administrator for NASA's Space Operations Mission Directorate. Steve Stitch, Commercial Crew Program Manager. Dina Cantella, Operations Integration Manager for the International Space Station Program. Benji Reed, Senior Director for the Human Spaceflight Program at SpaceX. And Salam Almari, Director General of the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. Each will deliver some opening remarks, and then we'll take questions for those on the phone and in the room. If you're on the phone, you can dial *1 to get into the question queue. Kathy, please go ahead and kick things off for us.
So, wow, what a beautiful launch. You know, we've been really enjoying the night sky with the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, and somebody mentioned to me that, you know, we added a bright new star to that night sky tonight. So it was a clear night, and you know, we always love it when we see these beautiful launches. Kind of stepping back and reflecting on things, though, the other thing that we all realized today was it's been 4 years since Demo 1. And so when you look back on all the work that's been accomplished, and we realize now that this is our 6th crew rotation mission, plus our crew demonstration mission, so 7 crewed missions over this last 3 years. So just phenomenal effort and progression by the team. You know, we had to scrub our first launch attempt, and I'm really proud of the team that they worked through a tough issue at the last part of the count and made the right decision to step down, better understand the issue, and then fix it and come back in. And the count tonight was just really, really quiet, kind of just like we like it, and really ended up with a beautiful launch. You know, it's another example that we fly when we're ready, and one of the ways that we ensure that we can fly our crew safely is to take it one step at a time, make sure that we're working through the operations cleanly, and I think the team demonstrated that tonight. You know, safely and reliably launching our crews to the International Space Station is really a critical capability. So I'd like to say congratulations to the SpaceX team, our NASA teams, and most of all, a special thanks to our partners that are giving us their precious cargo to be able to deliver to the International Space Station. You know, as you know, this mission isn't complete. Obviously, launch is a very, very important first step. And so looking forward to getting the crews to the International Space Station. Dina and the team have a whole lot of work for them to do. We're going to be keeping them super busy over the next 6 months. A very, very exciting time on the International Space Station. But for right now, we're going to keep our eyes on the ball and ensure that we bring those crews safely to the International Space Station. And I personally am going to be very happy to welcome Steve, Woody, Sultan, and Andre to the International Space Station on that welcome ceremony early tomorrow morning. And then hopefully hoping to get some sleep at that point. I think we're all kind of hoping to get some sleep after this last week, but what a great launch. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve Stitch, Commercial Crew Program Manager.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy, and it's great to be here, and thanks for the interest tonight in attending the event. It was a really great launch, really smooth countdown today, as Kathy said, and really worked really well. We worked just a few things during the countdown. First of all, Kathy commented on the T-tab system that we ended up scrubbing the launch for a few days ago. We went in and replaced 2 filters in that system, and that system performed very nominally tonight, no problem at all. It's a very critical system. It provides an ignition fluid up to the 9 Merlin 1D engines, and that worked great tonight. Early in the count, we had a little issue with the hydraulic system where we ended up swapping out a seal. That was really early before any of the teams got out to the launch pad, or we pressed up the rocket. It was a seal in a hold-down system that was replaced, and that system functioned really well. Overall, I thought the team did a great job tonight working through some minor issues and getting into the count. We watched the weather really carefully for the attempt tonight. In particular, the winds in the staging area were right at the limits, and those held within limits. Our meteorological team, the 45th Space Wing, and the meteorologist in Houston did a great job with the forecasting and gave us a great opportunity to launch tonight. The vehicle, Dragon's on orbit, and it's doing really well. The cooling system's working fine. We opened the nose cone and did a test firing of the 4 forward bulkhead Dracos, and we did a phasing burn with those. That all went nominally. We did have one issue with the sensor on one of the hooks that's used to hold the nose cone system closed, and I'll let Benji talk about that. But the system operated nominally on the backup and worked just fine, and we'll be able to probably take that sensor out of the system, and we'll have no problems with docking. A huge thanks to the NASA and SpaceX team for working so hard for all these months to get us here. When I reflect back on the 4 years from Demo 1 to today, how far our teams have come, how strong the partnership is between NASA and SpaceX, how we worked a lot of challenges, and it's just a little hard to believe that we're on our 6th crew rotation mission in just 4 years. The crew on board is doing great. They got out of their suits. There's a bit of an off-duty time, so the way we're letting them manage the time on orbit is from about 2 a.m. this morning to 10 p.m. tonight Eastern. They'll have an off-duty period so they can manage when they sleep, when they eat, and then they'll get back into their suits for docking. That approach initiation burn will be at 11:35 p.m. tonight, and then the first contact for docking would be Friday morning at 1:17 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, the crew's doing great. It's great to see some smiling faces on orbit. We're really excited. We're taking it one step at a time and looking forward to a good docking tomorrow. And I'll turn it over to Dina.
All right, thank you, Steve, and thank you all for being here. As you all saw that are here in this room, it really was a spectacular launch, and so I know I'm said it the 3rd time around, but it was incredible to see. It really was, and I really would like to also thank and congratulate the teams from SpaceX and Commercial Crew Program and the ISS teams and all the partnership, everybody who's made it a success up to this point. So ISS is doing great, and we are definitely looking forward to welcoming this new crew on board. ISS has been a really busy place where we had on February 17th, we had a Progress Russian cargo vehicle undock from a Zenith port on ISS, and then later on Thursday of last week, we had a Soyuz launch. That's an uncrewed Soyuz, and it had a successful and nominal automated docking on Saturday night. So that set us up with a new replacement Soyuz that can be used for Dmitry, Sergei, and Frank's return. And so you will be planning to move Frank's seat liner. He has a Soyuz seat liner currently in the Dragon Crew-5 Dragon, and we'll be planning to move that over to this new Soyuz here shortly. And so now we're excited about Crew-6 and its arrival. And as has been said, it'll be Houston time. By the time I fly back, it'll be Houston time, midnight 17, when it comes in docks. And so looking forward to a successful docking. A really busy place. The the next thing that will happen after that is the Crew-5 departure. And so the crew's going to spend, the Crew-6 guys are going to spend quite a bit of time, a few days with the Crew-5 guys, just, getting a handover, really getting the details about how the station operates, its little idiosyncrasies, and making sure they have a really good handle on things. And then after Crew-5 departs, very shortly after that, we'll have a string of flights, and so it's important that the crew has a good handover. So this crew, the Crew-6 guys, they're going to be on orbit for 6 months, and they have a lot of research ahead of them. And so Kathy mentioned we're going to keep them busy. Just some examples of the research. We're going to be doing some exploration type of research to try to further our capabilities when it comes to deep space exploration. We'll be doing experiments to see how materials burn in microgravity, and we'll be doing tissue chip research, which is related to heart and cartilage and brain functions. And, this is a really interesting time as well, since we have all of our international partnership and all of their science, and we'll be having some specific science associated with the United Arab Emirates science as well, with Sultan on board. So, like I said, keeping them busy, and then just to kind of go through all the visiting vehicle traffic that the crew will also see, bringing this science back and forth. We'll start with SpaceX 27, and that will arrive around mid-March. And then that'll be about a 30-day mission. And then hot on the heels of that, we'll be having the Boeing crewed flight test mission, and we're looking forward to having Sonny and Butch on board. And then we'll also have a Northrop Grumman 18-19 exchange. So Northrop Grumman 18 will depart, unberth, and then Northrop Grumman 19 will launch. And then we'll have the second private astronaut mission. That's Axiom 2. And then we'll have, soon after that, SpaceX 28, which is bringing, in addition to a bunch of science, it'll also be bringing the next set of solar arrays for our station upgrades. So we have a lot in store for the Crew-6 guys. We're definitely looking forward to seeing them on board. And again, I'm really proud of this team, and looking forward to what comes next. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Benji.
Great, thank you so much. So first of all, thank you, everyone, and here at Kennedy and across the nation and world who are paying attention to these launches. I think it's so important for all of us to remember. Kathy mentioned the conjunction of the planets and looking up at the stars, and we don't do that enough. Even those of us who are in the business, it's important to think that this is where we're going. This is where those 4 astronauts are headed right now, and to join a number of other astronauts who are already there, that much closer to the stars and the planets where we all want to go to, and why we drive for this exploration and ultimately making our lives multiplanetary. And it's a sacred honor. I've sat in this seat before, and we've said those words, and every single time, that's the truth, right? This is a sacred honor that we all share in carrying these people's lives to space and bringing them back home to their families. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. As mentioned already, the crew is safely on their way to a space station. We had a good launch, overall a very clean count, as we say, and good staging, and we got Dragon into a nominal orbit, and they're off and running. It's also important to note, though, that is just the first step in the process, right? They need to get to station and get docked, and then do their work that Dina's got set up for them, and then in 6 months we need to bring them home safely. And speaking of bringing people home, not to forget that, right on the heels here of this launch, we'll be bringing home Crew-5, and we've talked a little bit about that already, but it's also a critical activity and a critical operation that we're paying close attention to as we get ready to bring those guys home after all of their hard work on station back to their families. So that's another thing that we put a lot of attention on. I wanted to address, a couple of the issues that we talked about already. So there was the TTEB issue that where we scrubbed our launch on Sunday night. And I'll kind of go into a little bit of detail, so bear with me, and I'll drone on just a little bit about that. But TTEB is triethyl aluminum triethyl boron. It's essentially a chemical that kind of instantaneously combusts when it gets into the air. You think of it as a way of just very quickly lighting the match that's going to light your oxidizer and your fuel, in this case kerosene and liquid oxygen. So as a rocket works, I'm going to be a little bit basic probably for a lot of this audience, but in case you're sending out to your readers, I'll put this in. But fundamentally, you've got kerosene, you've got liquid oxygen, you've got to mix them together, and you want that to ignite exactly when you want it to ignite, and exactly all at the same time in a consistent manner, within the combustion chamber. Because what you want is that engine, that rocket with all 9 engines, to have very consistent and predictable thrust as you're going up. You don't want anything funny happening with the timing of that combustion within those engines. So it's really critical that you have some way of doing that, of lighting, of igniting those engines. The way that we do that is with this stuff called TTEB, and we flow to make sure that there's enough of this TTEB going into the engines when it's time to ignite them. We flow it up to the interface of the rocket, up to the interface of the engines, to basically get all the gas out of the system. It's sort of like if you replace your brakes and you have to, bleed the brake line system to make sure you've got all the air bubbles out of the lines. You want to make sure you just have brake fluid. It's the same idea. We want to bleed the line so that we have any gas out of that system, and we're sure we're going to have exactly enough TTEB, the correct amount of TTEB, to ignite the engines right when it's time. So during the count on Sunday night, we were watching, as we do, all of the different data, all the different signatures of information, as we call them, coming in from the rocket and the systems and the ground systems. And one piece of data looked a little bit funny. One of the signatures looked a little funny, which was how much TTEB is coming back into the catch tank, so coming out. So when you're bleeding in the TTEB to the rocket interface, you're pushing the air out there, or the gas out, but you also want to you're bringing the TTEB back to a catch tank, and you want to see how much you're catching in that tank on the way out. And we weren't getting clear data that we were getting what we would expect to see, the amount of TTEB coming into that tank. And that gave us pause for concern. At that point in the count, it was within an hour, but still, we had most of that hour to go. We had a very clean board, overall clean count. The teams weren't working other issues of anything significant. And so we said, well, we can go ahead and work this issue and try to understand it a little bit better. And so they did that, all of the engineers in the back rooms, as well as the key operators were looking at that and assessing, okay, are we okay? Are we sure that we're not getting enough TTEB into that catch tank or not? At the end of the day, we couldn't be absolutely sure that we had enough TTEB, enough of this ignition fluid, bled up to the interface of the rocket to make sure that we would get that consistent, exactly timed ignition that we need across all 9 engines. So we scrubbed the launch, because we need to make sure that we have that in place. Then in the interim, so after we scrubbed launch, we got into the system and we discovered that there was a filter that was clogged. And just like most fluid systems that you have in your house or your car or in rockets and ground systems, you've got filters. And this particular filter was clogged, and that's why we weren't getting enough TTEB into the catch tank. Looking back so far at the data that we have seen so far as we continue to look into this, probably there was enough TTEB to be able to launch safely. I think it probably would have been just fine. But that's not how we launch people. We launch people when we know for sure that it's going to be okay, that everything's going to go nominally the way we expect. And so with that in mind, as I mentioned, we delayed the launch. We changed out the filter. And then we also put in place some additional checks in our process and our procedures to get better information for future launches as well. And tonight it worked very well. TTEB bled in exactly as expected. We caught the amount that we needed to see in the catch tanks. All the other data signatures looked great. And obviously, as you saw, and everybody's mentioned the beautiful launch tonight, it was all 9 engines ignited just the way they were supposed to, and got the crew safely to orbit. That was the TTEB issue, and I will now talk about the Dragon hooks on the Dragon nose cone. So the way that works is you've got the capsule, and there's actually 12 hooks in that system. Only 6 of those hooks are used to hold down the nose cone. all 12 hooks are used when you go to space station to dock to station. So the same hooks that are holding down the nose cone are 6 of those hooks, plus another 6 that are not used for the nose cone. 12 are used to grab and pull you in to do hard docking into station. Just want to give you a sense of how this system works. And then again, when you leave station, you got to close the nose cone, and you want to relatch the nose cone. The 6 that are for the nose cone are used to pull the nose cone tightly closed and hold it closed. Tonight what we saw, let me back up again. On the system, each of the hooks has 3 different sensors, basically limit switches, that a combination of the information given from the 3 limit switches on all 12 hooks tells you the status of where you're at. Are we all the way closed? Are we all the way open? Are we moving through that opening process? One of those 36 limit switches was not indicating correctly. It was indicating that we weren't opening. Something was not right. It was not matching fundamentally what all the other limit switches were saying. The system, out of an abundance of caution, when it sees something funny in that data set, it moves all of the all of the hooks over to the redundant motor windings. And this is a really interesting subtlety, right? The motors are actually, it's all the same motors. There's just different windings, different wiring in each motor set. We moved over to their backup winding set, worked just perfectly. Everything's fine, and the Dragon nose cone opened. What we've done since that time is we assessed whether or not, so we're pretty confident, hey, it's just this one limit switch is off. And what we've done is we've assessed all of the rules and, the what-if situations, and you kind of go through this whole process. And we said, okay, we don't think we need to, we most likely, and we're going to go through the process correctly, through tonight. We'll talk with Steve's team. But we believe we'll be able to just ignore the data from that 1 out of 36 erroneous limit switch in order to go ahead and continue to function on the primary windings, and we'll also still have the backup windings, and we'll have all the other limit switches. So at this point in time, we don't foresee any issue, and we see no elevated risk to the crew for docking or for after 6 months when it comes time to close that nose cone again. I think that was it. I think you covered other stuff, and I'm sure there'll be some questions so we can answer those as well. Anyway, so after that, with all of those issues aside, the last thing I want to say is it is really cool to be part of this team. It's really neat to be up here with some of my great colleagues and friends that we've been here for a long time, folks that I'm working more newly with, and partners who have joined us since all of these wild missions that we've been doing. It's basically 4 years and exactly to the day and hour, minus I think 4 hours. So since we launched Demo 1, or 2 hours, I'm getting a motion from the back. So almost to the day and hour since we launched Demo 1. We just launched Crew-6, and that is so cool. And we couldn't do that without this partnership with NASA. We couldn't do it without the partnership with the 45th Space Wing. We couldn't do this with the dedication from SpaceX teams and all of their families, from the NASA teams and all of their families. And we couldn't do that without the dedication of our partners and Roscosmos and, of course, the UAE. And one of our newest and very excited partners, and exciting to have on board. So with that, Salim.
Thank you, Benji. Good morning, everybody. And honestly, I think it was also, I'd like to echo what everybody said. It was a beautiful launch. I think it was a gorgeous launch. And for us, I think made all the sweeter because we had an Emirati on board. And, that's not something that happens very often. So for that, I'd like to thank our partners in NASA leadership for all your support and effort over the years. We've got a very strong partnership. We have 4 astronauts training at NASA's Johnson Space Center. And this type of partnership and long-duration flight is something that we value very much. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank SpaceX, Benji, and your team for all the dedication that SpaceX that we've seen over the years and what we've seen throughout this launch campaign as well that your teams put in. really this type of partnership and the way the results are very clear is something that we value and envy as well. So thank you very much to both these teams. For us, as I mentioned, this is our second flight. So we had a short duration Soyuz flight in 2019 with Hazza al-Mansouri, who went to the ISS for about 8 days. And we learned a lot from that flight. And we saw the whole country was tuned in. And then we have a long-term strategy of wanting to be a player in human spaceflight because we see the importance of human spaceflight. We want human spaceflight to be in the region. There wasn't a lot of active human spaceflight in the Arab region, and we think that needs to change. And with this second flight and a long-duration flight, it's making history for us in the region. I think we'll be the 10th or 11th country that does a long-term spaceflight to the ISS. And I think that sends a clear message that we are here to be active players and we are here to stay. So we can only do that with partnerships, and we look forward to a successful docking and a very successful mission and to future missions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for those opening remarks. It's time now for questions. Remember, if you're on the phone, *1 will get you into the question queue. Please keep it to one question and let us know who you want to answer that question. We'll start here in the room in the front row, please.
Hi, Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. Benji, I'd like to follow up on the TTEB issue. Can you tell us a little bit more about the history of you had this before? And why did these filters clog? And what are you going to do pre-flight in the future to make sure that they're not clogged again, causing a problem? Thanks.
Sure, that's a great question. So TTEB is a long-standing, across the industry used for these types of engines as an ignition fluid, and we've been using TTEB for our rockets for F9. So the specific issue that we've seen with this clogged filter was new. We actually have a regular maintenance schedule, just like changing out your oil in the oil filter. We do the same thing. We regularly change out the filters in the TTEB system. In this case, what we think has probably happened is we'd actually changed out the fluid, and we may have introduced a little bit of air into that system that basically allowed for more oxidation to occur. So the mixture of the fluid with the possibly a little bit of introduction of air caused more oxidation. That's what it appeared to be that we were catching in the filter, was just more essentially oxidized material from the system itself in the filter. So we expect now to have that cleaned out, that's done and clean. We don't expect to see that anymore. We'll continue to inspect the systems thoroughly. Now that we know that this can happen, we will continue to change out filters regularly. And as I mentioned, there's just more data signatures and more things we can look at as we are, going through all of our operations and we go into counts to have a better sense of where things are at. Yeah.
Take another question from the front row.
Hi, Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now. I think this is probably for Steve Stitch and/or Benji. I think this was your last launch under your original commercial crew contract. I know it's not over till the crew is back when that contract is fulfilled. But I was wondering if you could take a step back and reflect. You talked a little bit about this being, so many missions since Demo 1, but just as you transition into those extension missions, do you feel like you're in a rhythm? Does it feel routine at this point? And for Steve Stitch, are you planning on adding more missions to Boeing's contract beyond their 6? Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then Benji can add. Yeah, of course we added flights already to the SpaceX contract. We added 8 more flights, and we have activated 3 of those flights already. So have those on ATP'd in contract. I mean, when you asked, is it routine now? I think we're in a rhythm of getting into these flights. Some parts of it are much more predictable as we get into the flight readiness process. Going through the vehicle readiness, I think that we're in a good routine between NASA and SpaceX, but every single flight that we get into the countdown of, there's a little bit of a difference in the Dragon configuration, a little difference in the pad, a little difference in Falcon 9, something going on with the fleet that we have to monitor. So it never is easy, and it's never really routine. They're each different. They each have their challenges. And what's exciting to me is the way the team works through those challenges every single flight, whether it be a structural problem or a pad problem or whatever. I think we do a great job of working through those together. Relative to Boeing, we're working really hard to get to the crewed flight test very soon. And we already have 6 flights for Boeing on contract, and we'll look out there as we work toward the end of the space station program in that 2030 timeframe and see if we need to add more flights at a later time. So. And
I'll just add that it's just an awesome time in spaceflight. And so when you look back at the opportunity that we've had to be able to provide these 6-month rotational missions is great. It wasn't what we originally planned to do necessarily, but we're happy to do it. And it's certainly exciting, but we also are excited to see so many other players hopefully coming onto the scene in all the different areas of going to space, whether it's in launch or space capsules or going to the moon or building, LEO habitats or all of these things. If we're going to open the space age and we're going to make life multiplanetary, it has to have a big ecosystem with a lot of people doing things. And I mean, that goes back again, we're talking about our new partners like, the United Arab Emirates. It's so cool to have these kinds of partners. And the ongoing international partnership with the International Space Station, right, with all of the players, ESA in Canada and JAXA and in Roscosmos. Like this is part of what we're trying to do globally, and so I think you look at it in the context of how it all comes together, and then for us, we look forward to more and more flights of different kinds, hopefully with lots of different partners who are, we're not necessarily just going to the ISS, but we've got other things we can go do. There's so much to do in space.
Great, thank you. We'll now move to a question on the phone from Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another question for Benji, if I could. First of all, is there any update on Starship for us on when we might see the big guy fly down in Boca Chica? And driving in every night, we always pass by the SpaceX facility on the highway and see those big gantry segments. Can you give us some sense of where those guys are going, what they're for, and when? Thanks.
Okay. So sorry, I'm trying to think about what segments you're seeing, but I think I probably have a good idea about what the question is. So overall, obviously we're here to talk about Crew. I'll always say that first because that's what we are here to talk about. But Starship is an exciting part of where we're headed, and it's an exciting part of our partnership with NASA, certainly. And you probably all saw that we had the static fire that we did on the Starship. And that's a very important milestone in the step towards our first flight. And I, personally, just from my own sense of having been in the business for a while and being at SpaceX for a while, we're feeling very convergent. That's the word I like to use. It feels like we're converging. So I feel good about where we're headed, and I'm excited to see where we're headed on that. And there's a lot of great work going on down here at KSC. Kennedy is an awesome partner. All the centers that we get to work with in NASA are really awesome partners of ours, and we get to we have a lot going on down here, and so it's good to see. You'll always see lots of interesting things when you drive by.
Thank you. We'll now take another question from the phone with Zach Aubert from the Launchpad News.
Yes, good morning. Zach Aubert, the Launchpad News, TLP Network. For Benji, looking back at Monday's scrub with the TTAB issue, of course safety is the number one priority, but if this had been a regular Starlink or cargo flight, would you have still stood down from the launch, or was this scrub specifically because it was a crewed mission? And wondering if there's any update on the Dragon XL vehicle and the contracts with NASA. And I'm not sure who from NASA it would be, but will there ever be a possibility of a photo of the Soyuz seat liner inside Dragon being able to be released? Because I know a number of us are wondering what that looks like. Thank you.
I actually forgot the first question. Oh,
we have scrubbed. Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, I haven't seen any pictures, so I don't think. But so if we would we have scrubbed? Look, you know what? The call on Sunday night was the right call, right? That was the right thing to do because we didn't have the data to go fly the mission that we were in. And every mission that you're in, you have to make that call. I don't think you can go back and kind of armchair quarterback the thing and say, oh, well, what have I done something different or what have I done in a different situation? Like the situation you're in is a real-time operational situation. So you have to make the right call in that situation. That's what I think we did. I'm very proud of the teams, the joint teams, in how they went through that.
And I'll add to that. I mean, I was a part of the operation, kind of watched it. You know, I've seen some shuttle countdowns where we had problems. We worked down late and had to scrub, and basically the team couldn't get comfortable that they had the right amount of T-tab up into the engines to start the rocket. And it's a very critical fluid, as Benji talked about, and so the team decided, hey, it's not a good day to go fly. This is very far out of family with what they've had and the hundreds of launches they've had in the past, and they stood down, and I suspect the same thing probably would have happened on a non-NASA flight for SpaceX. Relative to the seat liner picture, I don't know where we're at. Maybe
we can go. We'll have to talk to Roscosmos and see if that would be acceptable, and then discuss it with SpaceX. So let us look into that.
Do we have another question in the room? Right, on the front row.
People starting tomorrow morning after 1 a.m. I'm sorry, Phil Keating, Fox News. So once this crew arrives, how many people will be on board the station?
11.
It'll be a total, is that a record?
No, not a record.
Okay.
No.
And then 3 come back?
4.
Oh, four.
Four, yeah. The Crew 5, 4 astronauts come back on Crew 5.
Are they coming back on a Dragon?
Dragon, yeah.
Okay.
That vehicle is a Dragon capsule, and it's been there since we launched last October, and we'll look at the weather after we get docked, after we get Crew 6 docked, we'll start looking at the weather. First undock opportunity would be probably March 8th or 9th in that time frame. So.
And a quick follow-up on the T-Tab. Had you kept going and not scrubbed, and the levels of the ignition fluid were lower than what you want, what could have happened? I mean, could it have been disastrous, or could it have possibly just still succeeded?
I think what probably could have happened, I think we convinced ourselves, even after looking at the data, that we probably would have been safe. The engines probably would have started nominally just fine. I think what would have likely happened had we not quite had enough is the engines probably would have aborted and we would have not lifted off. So there's protection in there. The engines look for certain pressures over a certain time once the start command is sent to the engine, and so I suspect the system would have aborted out and shut the engines down safely or not started them at all. So.
All right, we have another question on the phone. We'll go to Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
And I guess is for Benji and Steve. And I'm just curious about how you look at these anomalous situations and make a decision on how to move forward. So on T-Tab, you had a reading that was unusual. You weren't quite sure what it was telling you, and you decided to scrub the launch. But on the hooks, you're having a reading that's anomalous. You're not quite sure what it is, but you've decided that in this case it's probably a sensor problem and you don't need to worry about it. I'm just curious how you go through that decision analysis.
Let me start, and then I'll see if Benji has anything to add. So I would say the two problems are a little bit different, and let me go through it. The T-Tab system, obviously it's a fluid that we need to get up into the engine to start it, and there really is no redundancy in that fluid. There's one line that comes up into each engine that provides that T-Tab. And when we looked at the data, again, as Benji described, this fluid is moving up into a line and then going into the engine and then running out into a tank. And we can see the quantity in that tank is not at the level it typically is. And so it gave us great pause to go that we might not have enough T-Tab into the engines to start. On the hook problem that Benji described, what we have there is a sensor that is either not functioning correctly or it's indeterminate. And as Benji said on that hook number 5, there's 3 other sensors, right? So in space, it's designed to have some redundancy, and it worked just fine and went to the backup system. And so these are little micro switches, and I suspect we might see it come back. My experience in space shuttle is sometimes they come back, and so it's a really different problem. One system has a lot of redundancy in it and multiple sensors, and the T-tab, it really was just, the T-tab going into the engine that we needed to have to start. And so totally different system. And in one case, we're proceeding on. Obviously, the nose cone opened just fine. Likely, the system's going to perform just fine at docking. We'll take that one sensor out. As Benji said, there's 36 other sensors. So it's a little bit different situation.
Great, thank you. We do have another question on the phone from Bill Harwood with CBS News.
Hi. For Steve Stitch, if I could, or maybe it's for Dina. Do you guys have dates yet for Crew 5? I mean, I was hearing March the 9th, but I wasn't sure about when splashdown might occur. And by the way, you guys, the Demo 1 mission was my birthday, and now you've done it again. So I want to thank you very much for the candles.
Happy birthday. Yeah, well, we've been talking about a 5-day handover or so, shooting for about the 9th, but we'll be looking at weather and, we're taking a look at that right now.
And happy birthday, Bill.
Happy birthday.
We'll go back to the room. Steve Clark.
Hi, Stephen Clark, Spaceflight Now again. I think a couple of questions for Benji. Just to follow up on Bill's earlier question about the tower segments outside of Hangar X off on Roberts Road. Are those for commercial crew cargo going to Slick 40, or are those for something else? Seen some work going on out there when we're driving in. Just wondering what those are for, basically. I think that was the gist of his question. And if you could walk through kind of the order of your missions for Dragon going through the rest of this calendar year, like what's the sequence that you're planning going through 2023?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. In terms of the tower, the segments. I haven't seen the specific segments myself, so I can't speak to that to tell you what those are. But I can tell you that we are looking forward to bringing up Dragon launch capability from Pad 40 again. And I say again because maybe a lot of us don't remember. A lot of folks don't remember. That's where we originally launched Dragon from in the early cargo days. And we're looking forward to have that brought up hopefully by the end of the year. It'll probably focus first on cargo missions, but it'll also be an excellent backup capability for human missions as well, for crew missions as well. So having that redundancy is really important for the ISS and just in general, and then it creates more flexibility. And then the other question again, give me that again, sorry.
Just walk through the Dragon missions.
The Dragon manifest, yes. So, I think actually Dina kind of talked through it already. It's pretty well, right? So we've got a cargo launch coming up right away, and then we'll have Axiom 2, a private astronaut mission to the space station, another cargo launch, and we'll also have the Crew 7 launch. Looking forward to that later in the year, and then another cargo launch as well. So a lot of crew and cargo missions coming up, and to space station, and not to forget, we also have our Polaris Dawn mission that'll be coming up in the summer, and that'll be a free flyer mission, not to station.
Is that before Crew 7, or is it later in the year?
I would guess so, yes. Yeah, that's what I would, yeah.
All right, we'll take another question in the room.
Hi, Ken Kramer, Space Up Close. My question for Steve or Kathy probably, what is the future of crew swaps with Roscosmos? You have an agreement now, I think it was for 2 or 3. This is the second one. So what's happening beyond that? How are the negotiations going? And what's the future of astronaut flights for the UAE? Thanks.
So we currently have an agreement with Roscosmos for 1 crew rotation mission a year on SpaceX. We're actually in the process of updating that to add the Crew 7 mission this fall, and working that through the Russian government and then back through, obviously, our side of, and to get final agreement. But that's our goal, is to be able to then support integrated crews. And we've talked a lot, I know you guys have heard from us a lot about why we feel like integrated crews are important for us to maintain the best logistics support to the ISS. And so with the addition of the Crew-7 agreement, we would have coverage for Crew-7 and Crew-8. And eventually, at some point when we have gone through our crewed flight test with Boeing and an initial PCM-1 test, our PCM-1 mission, we would be looking at also adding Boeing to an integrated crew agreement. We would like to continue that every single crew rotation mission has integrated crew on it to make sure that we have at least one USOS and one Roscosmos cosmonaut on it to ensure that we've got coverage for both sides of the segment on every single vehicle.
Yes, so I think, firstly, we have our attention firmly focused on this mission. Of course, looking at the future, we have 4 astronauts who are trained or training currently at NASA, and our objectives are to fly them. We are, of course, looking at short duration missions and long duration missions and beyond that. So this is what we plan to do, of course. Now, as a relatively small country and a new entrant in human spaceflight, I would expect us to look at a flight every 3 to 5 years, something like that. So, as I said, we're focused on this mission currently, and possibly one in 3 to 5 years, as we said.
All right, we have another question on the phone from Zach Aubert from the Launchpad News.
Yes, thanks for coming around to me again. Benji, looking at a future with commercial crew on Lunar Gateway, SpaceX has a contract for cargo missions. Last week, Mark Wise sort of suggested that SpaceX may be able to execute the first mission more quickly than the 4-year lead time in the contract. I was wondering if there was any update on how this contract's proceeding with NASA, and is Dragon XL still part of the plan? Thank you.
I really appreciate the question, but I think we should stay focused on Crew-6 and our crew missions to the space station. Thank you, though.
Do we have any other questions in the room? All right, that brings us to the end of this news conference. Thank you to all who participated. You can follow along with Crew-6's entire ride to the space station by checking out NASA's Mission Audio live feed on YouTube. There you can listen to real-time audio between the crew and the ground. Then coverage here on NASA TV and NASA's social media accounts will resume later today at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time for docking to the International Space Station about 2 hours later at 1:17 a.m. Friday. Thank you for watching. We leave you now with a recap of Crew-6's launch.
15 seconds.
Ready for an on-time launch for the instantaneous
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engines full power and liftoff of Crew-6. Go Dragon, go Falcon.
Now launching on Endeavour's 4th flight to the International Space Station. Vehicle pitching down range, 1.7 million pounds of thrust provided by the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. Hearing good calls, stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
We're now at T plus 34 seconds.
Well, in my left hand I have a feather, in my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings and on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather.
Across the nation are sacred sites that capture the spirit of America's character. And one of those places is right here, the Kennedy Space Center.
Every single vehicle that has carried humans beyond the bounds of low Earth orbit has undergone integration and testing in that vehicle assembly building, crawled down this roadway and launched right here from the Kennedy Space Center. The Space Launch System, mated with the Orion spacecraft, will continue this proud tradition.
As soon as we roll out of the vehicle assembly building, High Bay